didn't do it. I didn't do it. But I'm going to do it because it's time for the next fun-filled episode of the Main Street Randy Land YouTube channel. Hooray! Yes, I'm standing here on the inside of my Woolworth's lunch counter. Remember prison lunch? If you were watching the episodes, you know why these bars are here. And yes, they're wide enough that you can actually come through and try to get the people on the other side of the screen. Or eating their pie here at the Woolworth's lunch counter. So, we're over here and we're talking about stuff that's back here, and I could talk for hours with stuff. This is a Skilo tote board front glass. And it really is glass too, so I don't want to, be... It's got some weight to it. Look at that. Skilo. From 1 to 7... 16 to 22, 31 to 37, 46 to 52, and 61 to 67. Well, that's only half of a Skilo tote board because glass was only big enough for one side. The full size is over there. You see that one on the wall, and you can see there's two of these panels, and it represents the numbers that they're going to call as they play Skilo. Well, if you don't know what Skilo is, think of it like bingo. And they would call B5. And then they'd light up B5. And you'd mark the cards under the B, number 5. Well, it's the same thing. But instead of B5, it's S5. So instead of BINGO, it's SKILO. Skilo. Well, that's bingo. Yeah, it really is. Again, everything is amusement related. It goes back to the days of the boardwalk. The boardwalk had bingo. They had bingo right on the boardwalks and the midways and the fairs. All the people would go in there and they would play bingo. And they'd call the numbers under the B, under the I, the N, the G, the O, and bingo! And they would get paid cash. But just like all the other games, when they stopped the payouts of cash, bingo was no longer permitted because all you're doing is sitting there marking cards according to the number that they called. There's no player involvement. There's no skill involved into playing bingo. You're waiting for them to call a number and hoping that it's going to be your number. So bingo was a big deal on the boardwalks. So when they closed them down, it was quite devastating. What were they going to come up with instead? Let's make bingo so it is a game of skill. Well, how do you do that? Just like they did with the wheels, where the player pushes the button to start the wheel, the player pushes the button to stop the wheel. So they hooked up Skilo wheels, and they had buttons along all the counters, and they were all in parallel, so anybody could push the button, and it wouldn't make any difference. You wouldn't know who's pushing it, but it wasn't in the control of the game operator. It was in control of the players. So in order to bolster the point that the game was now a game of skill, it was no longer called bingo, it was called Skilo, because it's all about skill. You're pushing the button. Well, there isn't a lot of skill involved with that, trust me. And in a lot of instances, Skilos used to short out the buttons so that it wouldn't matter if you're pushing the button or not pushing the button. It's going to run its course on the timer, and really the operator's controlling it anyway. But be that as it may, the game became Skilo. So then to make it a little bit different than bingo, they added a few extra ways to win. So bingo usually was 5 in a row, vertically, horizontally, diagonally. Sometimes they had the 4 corners. Skilo added the large diamond, which was the center top, center bottom, far right, far left in the center, making 4 lights. It's kind of like 4 corners on its tip. They had the small diamond, which was the same thing, but in the middle, around the middle space. They had the 4 corners. They had the small corners. So they said Skilo has 16 ways to win instead of 12. Some of the Skilos went a little further and they made the postage stamp, which was like a section of 4 in a bottom corner or any corner, top and bottom. So they made different things, but it was still bingo. So instead of calling, B5, it was S5, right? And instead of I-17 for bingo, it would be K-17, because the I is now where the N would be of bingo. So when they would spin the wheel, unlike picking numbers out of a chambered. It would only be one ball for every number. What happens if the wheel stops on the same number? So it stopped on S15, the last number of S. Okay, a few spins later, it stops on S15 again. Well, they would say S15 already called, advance to K16. Advance to the next consecutive number. In that instance, it went from S to K because of SKILO, and 15 was the last number of S, and K, first number, was 16. So as they would light them up on the tote board, the caller, as he would go to light the next number coming up, would see that the number was called, or there were several numbers in a row that were already called, and if it landed on one of those numbers, the next available consecutive number would be the next number called. So if it landed on 15 5 times in a row, they'd be up to K20. And this is how they played Skilo, because they went for the event. You can't spin the wheel, keep spinning and spinning and spinning until you get a new number. You'd be wasting too much time. So they advance to the next number. You can also look up at the ceiling, and you'll see all these signs that are hanging around, and most of them are from Skilo. The one right over your head says Strand Skilo, and it was a opening and closing schedule, and when they were open and when they would close. And then you had the Mardi Gras sign when they were having their special events. This is another Strand Skilo sign over here. We have Surf Skilo. We have signs from all the different places. And where are you going to put the signs? Of course, but on the ceiling, so that you could stretch your head and look up, and you can see all the fun signs. You can do that while you're inside Randyland and you're walking by all the fun things that you would otherwise miss by not looking up. But you have to have stuff, particularly when you're standing here in prison, because you have to have something to do in your lockup while I'm over here at prison lunch. So you're going to have to excuse me because somebody just sat down and I got to go make them a grilled cheese and serve them through the bars at Randyland. Prison lunchtime. Bye, guys.